All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this dialogue. So something I really take away from Tracy's thesis work and my dissertation pilot studies, which really sparked this collaboration, is a disconnect between higher education administration and then students on the ground. Then there being this external unit, which specializes in recovery. That really, I think, can support students in ways that the university cannot do alone by itself. And it dawned on me, like, why aren't these partnerships more frequent? Because I know, Tracy and I both know, Ariel, you know, that there are so many community-based programs for recovery, and they're operating independently from the university. And it's like, why are we trying to work harder instead of working smarter and working together? Ariel, I think you really bridge the gap between the higher education student coming from the Collegiate Recovery Program, being in higher education, and then also that social work component between your academic and work history. So how do you envision potential partnerships between institutions of higher education and community-based recovery programs?
I think it's what you said, right? To be more productive. I think when I keep in the forefront of my mind and we keep it in the forefront of this field, it's to help folks find recovery and create beautiful lives for themselves, right? And so the more that we collaborate and work together and see that gap, that there's a way that we can fill that, the better. And so similar to what you're saying, just collaboration, I think meeting students where they're at, seeing young people or, non-traditional students who are passionate about recovery or maybe an ally in that space or have that experience, see them as experts right away, right? Like we just had our student impact project breakdown that happened within the Leadership Academy because it's the end of the semester. It's also one of the conference points that we'll have at ERHE. And it was just so stunning to see like how amazing these students are. The folks that are really, they wanted to step up. They wanted to partner with us. They wanted to learn. They wanted to be of service to their campus. They wanted something outside of their normal studies to latch onto and also have proof of, right? They wanted to feel supported in that. And so I think it's obvious, right? Like there's more me's out there. There's more you's out there. And so how do we kind of just collaborate and work together? And I think it takes conversations like this between the minds, between the higher ed and between, the community-based folks and just making it happen, right? Yeah.
Yeah. JC,
and I think that, one of the things that it seems it's difficult to do. I understand that, but the inclusion of student voices in any conversation, the actual students in recovery, I certainly recognize, and in the work that I'm doing now, trying to do this study with students in recovery to see what is it you might want from an institute of higher education. It's not easy to find those folks and get them to talk to me, right? Because there are issues pertaining to trust, a lack of trust of an institution, maybe a choice to have that part of their life be separate from their identity as a student. And yet I feel like it's almost designing programs, in the dark if you don't have those student voices. And it's not just all student voices, it's unique to each institution of higher education as well. One university's culture may be very different from another's, and so that student body may be looking for different things. And so I think that that's a challenge that I appreciate the difficulty of it, but I think that if we're going to develop programs that do have student buy-in and do give them what it is they're looking for, then we need to be hearing it from them.
You said something I think really resonates with what Ariel said, is that this lack of trust in the university. And so if there isn't already an established collegiate recovery program, a lot of students in recovery are seeking support from the existing community programs. Right. And so then how do we find the students on campus to develop this collegiate recovery program and get that buy-in? Is we partner with the community program, because they have all of the students or most of them. And it's like, how do we make this come full circle? And I think really going into this partnership, something Ariel, you said in your slides, higher education administrators not having the background to support students. I experienced this as a teacher, is like, the older I'm getting, the more disconnect I have from my students. It's just a generational thing. And I feel a lot of our admins are a little bit older than our students. And so what is that disconnect? Or not having the student numbers. But something else that came up is not having time. Like, how much are a lot of these program coordinators responsible for on campus? So then they also have to identify students, and then they have to host events on campus, but then they're also doing like the drug and alcohol program, education stuff in the health center. So if we partner with the community program where they just specialize in supporting people in recovery, how I think that would really leverage the support.
Yeah, I think that the time commitment on the part of the institution has to be there. The recognition that even if you provide, even if the administrators, the faculty, the staff are given the information about how to be supportive to a student in recovery, you're right. You point out that on top of everything else they're asked to do. And what's admirable about universities that are establishing or have collegiate recovery programs is they've said, this is important. We're going to designate staff. We're going to actually say, this is your job. But that's not true everywhere. So certainly this idea of outside partnerships, I also think it does hit that idea of trust, because an organization such as yours, Ariel, already has established its own credibility. And so you bring that credibility to the table. And I think that helps alleviate some of the distrust and create relationships.
Yeah, and I'll say this. So SAFE has only been around for 2 years. We've already served over 100 students as a part of our Leadership Academy in that time. So it's like, I think it's also, if we take it all the way back to the idea of what folks are learning when they are going to school of social work. There's still no collegiate recovery class. There's often not even an alcohol or other drugs or recovery class, right? And so not even having that knowledge, there's a lot of gap in professional development. What does this look like? And so also spending time within my organization and other spaces offering professional development to college administrators is a huge part of that work. And then also even letting them know, it's like, well, what do I need to do? I have to do all these things. And the first thing I tell them, the folks that I work with, is like, give the responsibility to the students. Like, let them kind of figure out what this looks like. This is their community. And you're a part of that work, and you represent the institution, but trusting that they have, that their values and their way of living really lines up with the institutional values that you're serving, like helping them meet where that is and meet them where they're at is just going to be so much more helpful. And it's just kind of like their jaws drop when they realize, like, oh, wow, like even if I have one student, if I build it, they will come, right? And I can hand off parts of it to them in the best ways, but it's also my responsibility before I even try to even maybe start building things out, is to maybe learn more before I do that, right? Like learn more about the population I plan on serving, and trust that you're doing the best that you can do too. Like that is so huge, because like you said, time, so much time. I'm like, how much time do you have dedicated to this scope of your work? It's like 5%, 10%. And that's on the institution's part. You can't fight that. And that's why you do need to collaborate with the community folks, see them as assets to support you, because you can't do it alone. No one can.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I did with the first pilot study. When I moved to Florida, I didn't have that sober sport community. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to start this because this is what I want. And I did a lecture, like a guest lecture in one of the World of Sport classes. And I was like, I need interns. Like, I've already talked to the Department of Sport Management, and they're willing to offer internship credit if you work with me. And I had to lay out like learning objectives, meeting hours. They have a whole form that you fill out. But I mean, any community-based program, if they want free help, can just reach out to the Department of Social Work, or even at Florida State, it's the Office of Leadership and Social Change, where they place students across the university into the community in internship credits. or most of our undergraduates have service learning hours they have to fulfill, but they don't know how to find some of the community-based programs that match their interests. And I just put on our like handshake, which is where students can go to find a location, some keywords, what they would learn. And then students, we met formally twice a week for like 2 hours. And I said, I need XYZ done. Go do it, figure it out, and come back to me. And it's, I think, really empowering students. They can figure it out. We just have to give a little bit of guidance or be that resource for them.
Not only can they figure it out, but I think that they are the best equipped to figure it out. I really feel like no matter how well intended, and you spoke earlier about the, let's just say the age difference, no matter how well intended a faculty person or an administrator or a staff person is, without that personal understanding and that lived experience of being a person in recovery, even if they know people who are in recovery, there's a limitation there. And I think that, there's a tremendous amount, like I said when I was talking in the slides, they're the knowledge experts. They're the ones that actually know. And what they need most, I think, from an institution is the support to make those things happen. One of the interesting things, though, that I heard in my interviews with the task force members was,
oh no, we can't hear you. The sound cut out.
Oh no, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all right. My internet connection's unstable. Oh my goodness. Anyway, it was a question of, is that too much to ask the students? And in my opinion, as a person who believes really strongly in go to the community that you're looking to serve, the answer is no. As a matter of fact, it would be a grave mistake not to go to the students and let them create what it is that they need. But yeah.
We have about 7 minutes left. Do you guys have anything else you think is important to kind of giving background to our kind of the initial discussion of how do we attract student buy-in? How do we promote these collaborations between the universities and pre-existing recovery communities to do, as Tracy just said, find those students to build communities on campus?
Go ahead.
I think I'll say that something that I think we've talked about offline, Chelsea, is just the piece about buy-in. It's like, this is one community where the expectation shouldn't just be on them to just like do, go. And I think that's something that you see in different experiences. I identify obviously as something else too, right? I'm a Black woman. And so just the pressure and the expectation that you have to do everything, but it's like, there's no incentive, there's no support for your work. We don't do that with engineers. We don't do that with other spaces. We don't do that with certain folks, they have a lot of buy-in at the institution. We don't do that with athletes, right, that are giving something. And this is something that this is a true identity, right? And the more that we can normalize that, and not just put pressure, but support on the institutions to do something, the better. And so that's why I think it's just so important. Like, if the institution can't, how can community providers who do have more resources give that to institutions? Because it's all a part of the same thing, right? Like, you're going to have somebody coming into your community space and they're may want to go to school for something. And then you're going to tell them, well, just go up the road. But what if they don't have a safe space? What if they don't have a brave space or a collegiate recovery program? And what if it's not there? So how can we see that as another way of bridging out recovery capital for the whole community, right? Like, it's all a part of that. And I think that I'm just so grateful to work at an organization that I'm not grateful for this, but their son passed away on his 4th day of college at a university from an overdose, right? And instead of just saying like, oh man, like, and going away to grieve, they said, this can't happen again. We're going to use all of our resources, everything that we can possible to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And we're going to use our money and our relationships to help implement spaces and also empower students to create what needs to be created. And that's really important. And we know that there's more people with those stories. We know there's more organizations that have that, and we're spending money on like calendars and pens and things that like we could put that to the students to help them to build this out. And I think it's just about us as community partners, and I'll speak for where I am. I'm outside of higher ed now. It's like up to us to be like, do we really need those pens? Or we can use that to allow one more student into our leadership academy to help support them, to build this out for what they need, and feel comfortable in that, feel heard and seen in that.
Thank you. Tracy?
You know, yeah, listening to what Ariel was just saying, and thinking about the conversations that I've had with some of the folks in higher education, thinking about how can they be of service to the students, it seems like the assumption is there that the institution thinks that it needs to provide everything, and it forgets that there are many resources that already exist. And so the question is, how do we get institutions to remember that there are people out there they can turn to? And then how do we encourage those organizations like yours, Ariel, to approach the institutions and say, this is what we have to offer? It's not their first thought. Their first thought, with all of the best intentions, is this is a need, we should fill it. And sometimes the way to fill it best is to find those folks that you can collaborate with. You can't be all things to all people kind of thing.
Yes. I love this idea of asking for help when we need help, and recognizing when we cannot fulfill those needs.
Yeah.
That's a really big takeaway. So go ahead and just wrapping up this conversation. I do want to invite anyone who who participated in our roundtable discussion to follow up and send me an email. We can get you in contact with SAFE Project. If you are an external organization and you are interested in connecting with the university, I'm sure Ariel and I are both willing to share our resources of how we've connected and we've bridged that gap in our own experience in creating those internships and those resume builders, and what we have really found to work to attract students at our campuses. And let's just start making a database of outreach. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, both of you, for participating in this roundtable discussion.
This was fun. Thank you.
Tracy.